And I'm here to pretty much talk to you about a story about using some equipment to create an infant respiratory rate sensor for developing countries. So what I was able to do was find a problem that was going on in third world countries and a device that they needed, and this is the story of creating that device and some of the support that I received in doing that. One of the support groups here is Libelium, the cooking hacks group. They were instrumental in getting this project off the ground. I want to say that right now. Hopefully Horace will be coming up here from that group and make himself available so that you could go over to his booth and actually see a demonstration of this health system and what actually I created and invented. I am an inventor, and I'm with Inspire Living. One of the interesting parts about inventing is that there's always a problem. And in this case, the problem was, how do you count respiratory rate? And in counting breath rate, it's a very, very difficult thing. Some of the issues that I had to face was that I'm only counting the respiratory rate for an infant to 5-year-old, okay? And in that group, I'm counting that rate because in third world countries, approximately 151 million children get infected. 151 million children get infected every year. That's a very large number to count. 2 million of those children die. So when I was approached by Project Hope, they asked me if I could find a way to invent something that would help count breath rate. Again, they only reach about 25% of the population of 150, of the 2 million that die, they reach 25% of that, which is a very, very small number. So they need a new diagnostic tool to help them with that. These are the conditions that I was working under. Let me go back here. Those are the conditions I was working with. In other words, I had to perform a diagnostic in under 1 minute. 1 minute I had to capture the respiratory rate. I couldn't use any batteries, in other words, changeable batteries. I couldn't use any disposables whatsoever. I had to make it rechargeable in the field. I had to make it usable for someone with a very low educational level. In other words, a healthcare worker in the field that was typically gotten from the community that helped out groups like UNICEF and World Health Organizations and the like. So I also had to stay away from various colors. The color white in various cultures is the color of death. So using those colors in foreign countries would be a bad idea. So a lot of research had to be done into what exactly colors I needed to use. This is before I even got the technology, the digital equipment, the testing equipment for respiratory rate. All of this had to be in my mind before I started creating a device. Now, what I'm showing you right now is the process of actually going through a lot of the equipment that's available in the marketplace right now. Accelerometers are very typically used in respiratory rate counting. Pulse oximeters, where they put it on your finger to count pulse rate. Counting beads are used in various foreign cultures as well, including stopwatches. Stopwatches are a very important piece for counting breath rate in foreign countries, in developing countries, sorry. So I've gone through the list of the devices that I had to look at before I integrated something into a device. So in other words, before creating something, I had to look at what was available on the market, what was available at reach that I could use to make a cheaper respiratory rate sensor for developing countries. That was my goal, that was my whole focus, okay? So when I looked at accelerometers, we found out that when they shocked, when they got hit, when they banged, they would get out of alignment. So the shock value for an accelerometer over time was not as accurate. Then I went on to spirometry, where you actually hook up a breathing unit to the nose and you breathe in and out. Well, when you're testing a lot of infants and you can't have disposables, that's a great way to pass an infection on to a lot of different infants. So that wasn't a good idea. Respirometers are the same way. Ha, ha. You know, when you blow into one of those respirometer tubes, ha, ha. You get a count of what the respiratory rate volume is in your lungs. Capacitance testing wasn't so bad. That's taking a look at when your chest expands, how a pulse of electricity goes across your chest. Inductance, the same thing. Linear positioning is a very interesting sensor. If you've ever touched or played with a linear sensor, I suggest that you do. It's almost like an electronic yo-yo. So when somebody breathes and their chest goes like this is linear positioning. One part or two parts come closer or recoil back and forth. Stereophonic imagery is coming. That's where they look at the body and they watch the body as it breathes, almost like a caregiver would. And that stereophonic imagery is going to be used in safety and security, in healthcare, in a lot of different environments. But for this environment, it's hard to do that because it's developing countries, so the cost of doing that is very high. I'm working with very, very low dollars. Now remember, I'm trying to develop a sensor to count respiratory rate for developing countries, so the price point has to be quite low. What I found out was that they don't work. And the problem that they all exhibited as I went through would not suit themselves very long in developing countries. So I had to take a look at something else. That's when I realized that something had to be invented. I had to invent something that was more useful than all of the technology that I was looking at. So as you can see, we're going to move up to China is a very, very large resource for electronics. Everybody knows that. But at the small level, at the micro level, counting on those small batches is not typically a very good thing. So there's a low reliability of quality when you're looking at small volume coming from China. You're buying from a production that changes over time. And so this is something that I had to keep into consideration when looking for something that could facilitate what I needed. In the United States, we have a lot of different respiratory rate equipment, but it's very expensive and it's very hard to take it into the field. So I had to take that into consideration. Now, remember, I haven't touched electronics. I haven't picked up a soldering gun. I haven't taken a look at anything other than what is going on right now. So if you were building a walking machine or you were building any type of video drone that you wanted to, you need to take a look at all of the technology that's available to you immediately. If that satisfies your need, then move forward. If it doesn't satisfy your need, you need to become an inventor like I did. So after I took a look at all the various places to get the equipment that I needed, I realized that I had to do something else. I had to do something different. So that's when I reached out to the people over at Libelium, over at Cooking Hacks. This is the board that I finally ended up using. This is their eHealth sensor shield for the Arduino and Raspberry Pi. Now on this device, there's various sensors. I think there's 9 different sensors that takes various readings from the body. Some one at a time, some multi-sensor inputs. But this gave me the foundation that I needed to take a look at how was I going to reduce the price of a product to make it available to 151 million infected children and the caseworkers that had to address them. So that problem was always foremost in my mind. This device, the eHealth sensor from Spain, from Libelium, from Cooking Hacks, gave me a rich and wonderful environment to play around, to get used to all the different devices for respirometry, spirometry, which this device has. So I was able to purchase this at a very low cost, purchase the Arduino board at a very low cost. Cooking Hacks provided all of the software, everything that I needed. Remember, you know, I'm talking about 151 million children, 2 million dying. I'm going to keep saying that because it's a big number. So I felt pressure that I needed to do something very quickly. This is the device that I decided to use because it gave me the foundation that I needed to talk to others to see if I was on the right track. This is the device. The gentleman who's pictured in the picture here, he's over there at the Cooking Hacks booth right now. He hooked himself up to all of these, and I used that as a sample of what I might need to do for an infant. How was I going to hook up this equipment to an infant in a developing country? These are problems that a developer has in any language, in any country. They need to look at this and they need to identify what are all of my problems. So as I'm moving forward, I'm still assembling all the problems that could be endemic to what I needed to do. In other words, I can't use a spirometry in the field because of the infection rate. So what I need to do is I need to find something in there that I could grasp onto that isn't going to hurt or harm the population I'm trying to serve, okay? So what I ended up doing was I ended up assembling all of this information from this device, from this e-health sensor platform from Libelium. And what happened was I finally hit an aha moment. And it's a very interesting aha moment, and you're not going to believe it. And this is why I'm glad you're here. This is what happened. Now, you know, I've said it many, many times. I was taking a look at spirometers, respirometers, all of the sensors that you'll find out here. I was taking a look at everything that was available to me from the medical community. I was taking a look at everything available from pulmonologists, from all types of caregivers. How do I count breath rate? And what I found out was they were all wrong. Every sensor I touched, every piece of equipment that I touched that was available to me in the community that was already recognized for counting breath rate was wrong. I found an anomaly. That anomaly was that when I made a measurement, and I made the measurement twice, they were significantly different. In other words, when I'm going to test a baby's breath rate, I get a number. When I test the baby immediately again, I get a different number. That made me step back as an inventor and say, what's going on here? Normally, you would accept the rate as given. You take someone's temperature, you pull it out of their mouth, you look at it and you go 98.6 and you accept it. I didn't. I'm an inventor. I don't believe anything, nothing. So I took a look at why is there a difference. I started taking a look at all of these wonderful sensors that I got from eHealth, the platform, to test and diagnose this. Again, I'm getting two different readings from the same sensor. These are quality sensors. This is equipment that has gone through rigorous quality control, far better than I could ever. So I had to believe that this was an anomaly. This was something that no one had seen before. This came out of the blue, okay? So now I can't use the sensor I invented. I invented a non-spinning gyroscopic sensor for the security industry. It also could be used for counting breath rate. I can't use it. My own sensor was wrong. Everything that I purchased was wrong. What am I going to do now? Now I'm faced with a true problem. I have to invent not only a new type of sensor system, I have to invent a whole process. A way of getting breath rate to dead accuracy. I thought you were waving at me. Hi! So what I ended up doing was, I ended up taking all the various sensors that I could find, and I started playing around with them. I started realizing that all of the information I was getting was important. The most important thing I did was I went to the doctor's office. I went to the pediatric physician, and I went to her office, and I sat with her, and I watched her. I watched her take a look at a patient, a baby. I watched the way she walked into the room. I watched the way she looked into the baby's eyes. I watched the way she looked at the skin tone of the baby. I watched as she felt the skin to see if there was sweat on the baby, if the baby was anxious. I saw her as she grabbed her arms and tried to feel if there was any type of shaking or shimmering in the body. I noticed that she positioned the baby down. I noticed that she rested her hand on the baby's abdomen as she was talking to the baby to look at alertness, to see if they were paying attention, okay? These were all the things the doctor was doing. This is what I needed to do. I needed to figure out why the doctor was doing it better than any sensor I had seen, okay? So I had to match up various types of sensors. I had to build a sensor array. I had to take more than just an accelerometer, more than a spirometer. What I needed to do was I needed to find 4 or 5 different sensors that gave me information to say, this is exactly what the breath rate is. I know because the baby is in this position. I know because the baby's not shaking. I know because the baby's heart rate is this. I know because the baby's galvanic skin response, that's me. My baby's galvanic skin response is something different, okay? The baby's not anxious. The baby is laying in a certain position. Now what I do is I take all of the sensor input and I take the baby's breath rate. Now I can get something that was dead accurate. So what I've done was I've taken all of that information and I've assembled it into this device. And what this device does is, working with Texas Instruments, based on Libelium's platform, I was able to shrink down that sensor array, those electrodes, everything I needed, into something that was bigger than the baby's belly button. I also took, I have it here, I also took, you're gonna, when I show you this, you're gonna say, yep, that guy's an inventor. Here's the Libelium case that I used. That's my baby, that's what I used. And this is what I used to put a very non-invasive, non-anxious strap around a baby, not 360, because that created a lot of anxiety for the baby. That raised the respiratory rate. Guess what your respiratory rate is when you're talking, like I'm talking to you right now? Guess what it is? 7. 7 breaths a minute, your respiratory rate. I have a very large head, and this is not working. Like Sherlock Holmes said, there must be something in it. So what I ended up doing, you're not getting any of these jokes. So what I ended up doing was, I ended up taking a slap strap that all you guys are familiar with. And what I do is, the healthcare worker carries it on their arm like that. When they have to test it on the baby, they take it open like this, they place it on the baby, this part underneath here grabs the baby and pulls it close, very gently. Those electrodes are now stimulized and testing. Then what I did was, I made the whole strap an electrode. Both sides are electrodes. Guess what? They're both carbon, which means I can wash them. I can just wash them off, and I don't have to, what? Use disposables. Remember, I can't use any disposables. I also had to figure out a way that I could recharge this in the field. So what I do is I hook this up to a charger that you're going to see very shortly, and as the unit falls in the hut in developing countries, it charges from the hand crank charging unit. Remember, I can't use batteries, I can't use disposables, I have to use certain colors, I have to make this reusable in every sense of the word. I truly had to invent something. And what you see before you is the device that measures all of those different areas. It assembles them and says, this is the protocol for an exact breath rate for an infant to 5-year-old. But it ends up that it works for everybody. Everybody can use the same thing. So, moving on here, this, what I'm going to show you next is Judith a doctor? Is Judith a doctor? Judith Moore from Project Hope. Unbelievable woman. She's given me so much insight into what I had to invent. She's an amazing woman. She's one of those heroines that goes out into the field and saves people day after day after day in developing countries. And you're going to see her for the first time, and I am so proud that I can present her to you.
We're testing and developing a respiratory rate sensor that we call the Inspire sensor, designed to aid in the diagnosis of pneumonia in infants and young children. Currently, as you know, health workers, or all health workers, and particularly community health workers, using the IMCI guidelines and counting respiration rate using a watch or a timer. This sensor actually accurately measures the respiratory rate, and it indicates if it's abnormal for the age of the child. It's easy to use. It's going to go around the chest of the child, or there is a piece that comes off and can stick straight onto the chest. It's, we think the life of that device is about 5 to 10 years.
Here's the charger.
It's powered by a hand-cranked battery.
That hangs from the hut. That hangs from the hut.
There are no consumables or replenishables. It can transmit the data to a cell phone or a computer, and the cost is $20 or less.
$20 US, okay? This is something that I had to do. From the beginning, I had to reinvent counting respiratory rate. It was an amazing story. It's an amazing journey for me. Thank you for listening to it. Very good.